A single gust rattled the bare branches above. Somewhere behind her, heavy boots crunched on ice. She tightened her grip on the white cane, breath clouding in the cold air. Then, clear as if someone stood beside her, a voice filled her mind, low, steady, certain. "Do you trust me?" Harper's lips parted. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. "Yes, even if it hurts," she whispered. From somewhere in the snow's silence, paws padded closer, slow, sure, unerring, as if the voice in the steps had always been one. Snowbridge, Oregon, was the kind of place where time seemed to breathe slower, the kind of place where neighbors nodded from porches, and the scent of pine and wet bark lingered in the air long after snowfall. That November, snow had arrived early, blanketing the rooftops and forest edges with a hush so deep it seemed even the wind chose to whisper. On the outskirts of town stood a pale gray house trimmed in darker slate blue. Its windows shuttered more often than not, its lawn bare except for a crooked mailbox leaning toward the road. This was the Quinn residence, once Harper's mother's childhood home, and now the place where Harper Quinn, 8 years old and blind since infancy, was meant to begin again. Harper had lost her sight before she ever learned to ride a bike, before she ever saw the difference between her mother's eyes and the stars. A rare viral infection had left her optic nerves damaged beyond repair. But Harper had learned to navigate her world in other ways, with her hands, her ears, her memory, and most of all, with her heart. She was slender and small for her age, with chestnut hair that curled gently around her cheeks, and skin as pale as the falling snow outside her window. Her voice was soft, and when she spoke, it was always as if she were choosing her words with care, like the world might echo them back. The only constant in Harper's life now, aside from memory, was Axel. Axel was a 6-year-old German shepherd with sable and black fur and cloudy milk-colored eyes that saw nothing. He wore a green blindfold tied gently over his face, not out of pity, but as a symbol. Like Harper, Axel had learned to move without sight. He followed her with silent loyalty, sensing every twitch of her fingers, every tremor in her breath. Theirs was a quiet bond, deeper than language. They had both lost more than most could imagine, and now, together, they survived. Harper's mother, Elena, had died in a car accident less than a year ago. The world had crumpled quickly after that. First the hospital, then the funeral, then the court dates. And soon, Harper found herself in the care of Travis Quinn, her late father's only brother. Travis was in his early 40s, sharply built with a clean-shaven jaw and hair always parted straight as a blade. In public, he smiled easily, shook hands firmly, and knew how to make adults believe everything was just fine. But behind closed doors, Travis rarely smiled. His voice, once sweet with promise, had soured into commands. He moved through the house like a shadow too large for the walls, and when he spoke, it was clipped, always in tones that made Harper flinch. At first, Harper tried to believe he was just lonely. That grief had shaped his silence. But grief does not lock doors. Grief does not unplug phones. Grief does not glare when you ask to go to school. Travis had started small, suggesting Harper stay home to adjust, then telling the school she was emotionally unwell. Her bedroom was moved to the farthest end of the house, her radio removed, the windows nailed shut under the guise of safety. Axel was allowed to stay, barely. But Harper had noticed the way Travis stiffened around him. Axel growled the first time Travis tried to touch her cane. After that, Travis kept his distance from the dog, but his tone grew colder by the week. Harper had learned not to ask questions, but each day, she folded her thoughts into imagined letters to her mother, little prayers she whispered to the dark. That afternoon, the snow pressed gently against the window panes. Harper sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest. Axel curled at her side like a silent sentry. Her fingers traced the soft fur behind his ears. "He doesn't like you?" she whispered under her breath. "He never has." Axel didn't move, but his breathing deepened, as though he were listening even in sleep. Meanwhile, across town, Jessica Monroe zipped up her windbreaker and walked the snowy path to the small schoolhouse. Jessica had only arrived in Snowbridge a few weeks ago, hired to teach second grade after the previous teacher retired unexpectedly. She was 32, with shoulder-length auburn hair always tied loosely at the nape of her neck, and soft hazel eyes that noticed more than people expected. Jessica had grown up the eldest of 5 siblings and had spent years teaching in more crowded cities, where noise was constant and children often got lost in it. In Snowbridge, everything was quieter, too quiet sometimes. That morning, as she reviewed her attendance sheets in the empty classroom, one name made her pause. Harper Quinn? Again? It had been nearly 2 weeks since Harper last attended class. No emails, no phone calls, no explanation. Jessica had asked the front office, but they only shrugged. Personal family matters, someone had told her, but something about that didn't sit right. Jessica remembered the little girl clearly, the one with the seeing cane and the calm voice, and the dog, the German shepherd with the blindfold. No one forgets a dog like that, or a child like Harper. She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her clipboard. In a town this small, disappearances weren't normal. They were noticed. But no one had asked about Harper. No one but her. That night, Jessica sat by her small apartment window, watching the snow drift down like ashes. She jotted a note on a yellow sticky tab and placed it beside her kettle. Call Quinn residence tomorrow. Ask about Harper. Back in the quiet room on Maple Hollow Road, Harper whispered again into the fur at Axel's neck. If I write her another letter, will she hear me? Axel shifted his weight, pressing closer, as if to say yes. Harper closed her eyes and tucked herself beneath the blanket. She would write another letter tomorrow. She would keep writing, even if no one ever read them, because someone had to know. Even if it was only Axel. The snow outside had hardened into a slick crust by the time December crept over Snowbridge. The silence in the Quinn house thickened like syrup, too still, too clean, as though noise itself had been banished. Inside Harper's room, the world remained dim but warm. The old radiator clinked and hummed, but it was Axel's breath, steady, rhythmic, that Harper clung to like a lullaby. Axel, the blind German shepherd with the green blindfold, lay beside her bed, his head turned toward the door, ears half pricked. Though his eyes were sightless, he could always sense the shift in air pressure when Travis moved through the hallway. He had grown more alert these past few days. The sound of Travis's steps, their quick, sharp rhythm, had changed. Harper had noticed too. Her uncle had become more abrupt, his mood swinging from cold silence to clipped irritation over the smallest things. Yesterday, she'd spilled a glass of water and heard him slam a cupboard so hard it rattled the dishes. The worst of it was that Harper no longer asked to go outside, and Travis, it seemed, preferred it that way. That evening, a sharp gust blew against the house, rattling the back door. Harper sat on the living room floor, gently brushing Axel's fur, while Travis stood in the kitchen behind her, pacing. She could feel his impatience like a scent in the air. "Put that dog in the laundry room," Travis snapped suddenly. "He's shedding again." Harper flinched. "He'll get cold in there." Travis walked forward. She could hear his heavy boots crossing the wooden floor. "I said, put him in the laundry room, or I will." Axel's body tensed. A low growl rumbled in his throat. "Don't," Harper whispered to Axel, her fingers gripping his collar. "It's okay. I'll do it." But when Harper stood and reached for her cane, she misjudged the step. Travis's shoulder brushed her sharply, too sharply to be an accident. She stumbled backward, her foot catching on the rug. She fell, knees first, then palms, then chin. Axel barked, loud, deep, furious. It was the sound of protection, of outrage, the kind of sound that made the hair on your neck rise. From the neighboring house across the street, a man named Ben Carter looked up from his newspaper. He was in his 60s, retired, with thinning gray hair and a belly softened by decades of black coffee and Sunday donuts. A former county electrician, Ben had lived in Snowbridge his entire life. He knew everyone, or at least enough to know when something sounded wrong. He moved to the window and squinted toward the Quinn house. The lights were on. The barking continued. He frowned and picked up his phone. "Yeah, hi, I need to report a disturbance," he told the dispatcher. "The Quinn house, that big shepherd dog. They've had problems with him before, I think, but tonight it sounds bad." When the police cruiser arrived 20 minutes later, the street had gone quiet again. Snow, dusted the edges of the lawn, and Axel sat stiffly beside Harper, who was curled into a ball on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself. Travis answered the door with his shirt tucked in and sleeves rolled up. Officer Meredith Lane stepped inside. She was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features and kind eyes. She had served in the county for nearly 15 years and was known for her steady voice and refusal to jump to conclusions. "Evening, Mr. Quinn. We received a call about a disturbance." Travis forced a tight-lipped smile. "Just the dog. He's unpredictable, aggressive even, barking at shadows." He knocked Harper over, again. "I've been trying to manage it, but I think it's time animal control got involved." Behind him, Harper's voice cut through the air, barely a whisper. "That's not true. Axel didn't knock me." Meredith turned to look at her. The girl sat trembling, her pale hands clutched around Axel's collar. Axel didn't bark this time. He only lowered his head and let out a soft whine. Travis's voice hardened. "Harper's emotional lately. She's been through a lot. It's not unusual for trauma to cause confusion." Meredith looked at Axel, then at Harper. "I'm going to file a temporary report," she said slowly. "Animal control will make the final call. In the meantime, the dog will need to come with us." "No, please," Harper whispered. Her voice broke like glass. But the decision had already been made. An officer from Animal Control arrived shortly after. He was a young man named Sam Ortega, mid-20s, kind-eyed, but nervous, as though always a half-step behind the world. He wore gloves and a padded coat and knelt softly beside Axel, murmuring, "Easy, buddy, easy now." Axel didn't resist, but he turned his head toward Harper and gave one final soft sound, as if memorizing the shape of her sadness. Harper didn't sleep that night. Neither did Jessica Monroe. Earlier that day, while cleaning out her classroom drawer, Jessica had come across a small envelope tucked behind a set of construction paper packets. It had no address. Inside was a Braille letter, folded neatly and taped to it. A transcription from a former teaching assistant who had known Braille fluently. "Dear Mama, Travis gets quieter, but meaner. He tells me I'm lucky to be here, but I don't feel lucky. Axel always knows when he's angry. He growls when I can't. I miss you. Please come back." Jessica sat frozen in her chair, the letter trembling in her hands. There was no mistaking it. This was Harper's handwriting. She locked the letter in her desk drawer, pulled out her phone, and dialed the number for Oregon's Department of Child Welfare. "I'd like to report a concern," she said. "It's about a student. Her name is Harper Quinn." The wind howled through the pine-lined streets of Snowbridge as December pressed forward with icy resolve. The snow no longer fell softly. It bit at windows and drifted high against the fences. At the county child care center just south of town, the wind battered the old shutters like a ghost, desperate to be let in. Inside, Harper Quinn sat curled in a heavy blanket on the edge of a cot that smelled faintly of disinfectant and lemon. The center was quiet, though the muffled sounds of cartoons echoed down the hallway from the common room. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, meant to comfort, but Harper knew better than to trust color. She only trusted Axel, and Axel was gone. A woman named Cheryl Donovan had been assigned as her case counselor. Cheryl was in her late 40s, round-shouldered, with silver-streaked hair always pulled into a tight braid, and a voice that carried a mix of patience and worn-down exhaustion. She had worked in child services for nearly 2 decades and had learned to carry other people's trauma like a coat that never came off. Cheryl had a soft spot for children who didn't cry, not because they weren't in pain, but because they had already learned no one listened. She sat across from Harper that afternoon, holding a warm cup of cocoa in her hands. Harper, in contrast, sat quietly, her pale fingers brushing the worn edges of the blanket. "I know it's scary, sweetheart," Cheryl said gently. "But this hearing isn't to punish you. It's so the judge can understand what's going on and make sure you're safe." Harper tilted her head slightly. "My uncle said no one would believe a blind girl. He said people think we make things up." Cheryl's expression softened, the corners of her mouth pulling down. "Well, I believe you, and there are others who do too. You're not alone." Harper didn't respond. She only lowered her face, the tips of her hair brushing against the wool blanket. In another part of Snowbridge, Jessica Monroe had just stepped into the district courthouse building, an aging structure of sandstone and old wood beams, its narrow windows framed with frost. She clutched a thin folder close to her chest, her breath visible in the cold air. Jessica hadn't stopped moving since she found Harper's letter. Something about it had clawed into her bones. She had spent the past 2 days pulling every thread she could find, calling contacts, emailing former colleagues, and scouring public records. It was during one of those searches that she found something strange, a name, Travis Michael Quinn, a report, Cautionary Guardian, pending allegation review. The file originated from Boise, Idaho, 7 years ago. The case never went to trial. The child involved was eventually removed and adopted by distant relatives. The file had been marked inactive and then buried under a stack of transferred cases. The allegation had faded with time and distance. But it existed. Jessica stepped into a small office labeled Judge's Clerk, Delaney. Behind the desk sat a woman named Ruth Delaney, early 60s, tall and thin as a coat rack, with short-cropped gray hair and reading glasses perched permanently at the tip of her nose. She was known for her precision, her disdain for gossip, and her loyalty to truth, even when it ruffled robes. Jessica placed the folder on her desk. "I'm not a lawyer," she said, "but I'm a mandated reporter, and I believe this child is in danger." Ruth opened the folder. Her expression remained unreadable. "And what are you asking, Ms. Monroe?" Jessica swallowed. "That the judge allow Harper's service dog to appear at the hearing. I know it sounds strange, but Axel, he's not just a dog. He reacts to Travis in ways that no one's been able to explain. I believe he's a critical emotional witness." Ruth tapped her pen slowly on the edge of the desk, then nodded once. "I'll take it under advisement." Meanwhile, at the animal control center on the outskirts of town, Axel lay curled in the corner of a large steel kennel. Though blind, his head moved every time footsteps passed the door. His fur was still brushed and clean, but his energy had dulled. The workers there were kind, but the place smelled of bleach and fear, and too many dogs waiting for no one. A young volunteer named Gracie Fields often stopped by Axel's kennel. Gracie was 17, tall and lanky, with a buzz of orange hair and freckles across her nose. She didn't talk much, but she sat beside Axel every afternoon, legs crossed, reading aloud from old fantasy novels. "You remind me of the knight in this story," she whispered one evening. "He couldn't see, but he still knew when people were in danger." Axel stirred then, his head lifting slightly as if to say, "I hear you." 3 days later, Cheryl entered Harper's temporary room at the care center, holding a sealed envelope. "The hearing's been scheduled," she said softly. "Day after tomorrow." Harper's hands curled into fists beneath the blanket. "Will Axel be there?" Cheryl hesitated. "I don't know yet." But Jessica wasn't finished. The following morning, she returned to the courthouse with Ruth's note in hand and waited outside Judge Howard Bell's chambers. Judge Bell was a man of structure, mid-60s African-American, with a booming voice, a sharply tailored black robe, and a reputation for sticking to the rulebook. But he had once said in an interview, "The law is not a wall, it's a door. It's up to us to decide who gets to walk through." Jessica stepped in as he finished reviewing a docket. "I read the file you submitted," he said without looking up. "You want the court to admit a dog into the hearing room?" "Yes, sir," Jessica replied, steady. "A blind one?" "Yes." He finally looked at her, eyes thoughtful. "Has that dog ever lied?" "No, sir." He chuckled faintly, then leaned back in his chair. "I'll allow it, but he'll enter under escort, and he stays near the child only. If I hear so much as a sneeze from the gallery, he's out." Jessica smiled, the relief so strong it nearly buckled her knees. Snowbridge's courthouse stood like a stoic guardian in the middle of town, its aging bricks and stone columns dusted in a fine layer of frost. The wind that morning was sharp and steady, scraping across the windows as if trying to listen in on what was about to unfold inside. In courtroom 3, the air felt heavy, charged with an anticipation no one dared speak aloud. Harper Quinn sat on the far left side of the room, flanked by her temporary caseworker, Cheryl Donovan, who held her hand gently but firmly. Harper wore a dark wool dress and soft-soled shoes that didn't make a sound on the tile floors. Her cane rested across her lap, though she barely moved it. Her lips pressed together, her brows slightly furrowed, not in fear, but in focus. Across the room, Travis Quinn sat upright in a dark navy suit, his hair slicked down, his jaw tight. Next to him sat his lawyer, Gregory Miles, a well-known defense attorney from Eugene, late 40s, with silver temples and a voice that always sounded like it was about to object. He leaned in to whisper something to Travis, who didn't look away from the judge's bench. Judge Howard Bell entered without fanfare. The room rose. He settled into his chair with practiced calm and gave a single nod. "We are here today to consider the guardianship and welfare of Harper Quinn," he began. "Due to sensitive testimony, all non-essential personnel will remain outside unless otherwise called." Jessica Monroe sat in the second row, her coat still dusted with snow. She clutched a notepad, though she had no official role. She was just a teacher, but today she had become something more, a witness in spirit, a protector in silence. "Ms. Quinn," the judge said, turning his gaze toward the small girl in the witness chair, "are you ready to speak?" Harper gave a tiny nod, though her voice trembled as she replied, "Yes, sir." The room hushed. The prosecuting attorney was Clara Benson, a young woman in her early 30s, African-American, with a warm face and steady posture. She moved with calm precision and stood before Harper with a clipboard in hand. "Harper," she began, "can you tell us what happened the night your dog was taken?" Harper took a breath, long and slow. "My uncle said Axel bit him, but he didn't. Axel only barked because Uncle Travis pushed me." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Gregory Miles stood abruptly. "Objection. Hearsay and speculation." Judge Bell raised a hand. "Overruled for now. The child may continue." Harper's fingers curled tighter around her cane. "He doesn't yell when people are watching. But when we're alone, he moves my things so I trip. He tells me no one will believe me, because I can't see." She paused. "But Axel always knew when he was angry. He stayed by me. He growled when I couldn't speak." Travis's jaw clenched. He muttered something under his breath to Gregory, who immediately stood again. "Your Honor, we believe the child has been emotionally influenced by her dog and this new caretaker. She's been removed from a familiar environment, told what to think, what to feel." Jessica leaned forward in her seat, her heart pounding. But before the judge could respond, there was a quiet knock on the courtroom door. A bailiff opened it. A young woman entered first, Gracie Fields, the animal shelter volunteer, her hair tucked under a wool cap, cheeks pink from the cold. Behind her, guided gently by a loose lead, was Axel. The courtroom froze. Though blind, Axel walked with unmistakable intent, his green blindfold neatly tied, his head low, but alert. As if guided by something deeper than scent, he moved down the aisle, pausing only once before making a sharp right toward the witness stand. Harper's cane fell from her lap. Her small hands stretched out instinctively, and within seconds, Axel pressed his head into her palms, letting out a soft, unmistakable whine. Harper whispered, "Axel!" The judge cleared his throat, but his eyes didn't hide the emotion rising. "Let the record show that the service animal has approached the witness voluntarily." Axel stood by Harper's side for only a moment longer before something shifted. He turned. Slowly, methodically, he stepped away from Harper and toward the defense table. His paws clicked softly against the courtroom floor. 2 feet away from Travis Quinn, he stopped and began to bark. Loud, deep, repetitive. Judge Bell's hand hovered over his gavel. "Order." Axel barked again and then lowered his nose toward the side of Travis's blazer pocket. He sniffed, barked once more, then sat and stared. The bailiff stepped forward. "Sir," he said, addressing Travis. "May I?" Travis hesitated. "There's nothing in there." Judge Bell nodded once. "Proceed." The bailiff reached carefully into the pocket and withdrew a small brown bottle. He turned it in his hand, frowning. "No label, no prescription name. Smells like benzodiazepine." Clara Benson stepped forward, voice firm. "Sedatives, Your Honor, possibly unprescribed." The judge looked down. "We'll take a 10-minute recess to verify the contents and review additional evidence. Later that afternoon, After lab confirmation and a series of hushed conferences between the attorneys, Judge Bell returned with the ruling. This court finds that Travis Quinn poses a potential risk to the emotional and physical well-being of Harper Quinn. The presence of an unprescribed sedative, coupled with testimony and prior flagged history, necessitates an immediate revocation of guardianship. A full investigation into the previously sealed Idaho file will now be reopened. Temporary custody is granted to Child Services, pending review. Jessica let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Cheryl placed a protective arm around Harper's shoulders. Axel remained seated at Harper's feet, calm, resolute, and Travis Quinn said nothing. The winter sun returned to Snowbridge the week after the court ruling, melting the top layer of snow into soft slush that glittered on rooftops and trickled down storm drains. The courthouse had emptied, the tension dissolved, and in its place bloomed something gentler: relief. At the center of it all stood a quiet, narrow home, now filled with warm light, soft music, and the sound of healing. Harper Quinn, now legally in the care of Jessica Monroe, stood at the edge of her new bedroom, a small space with white curtains, a thick beige rug, and a brand new upright piano against the wall. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant, then curious. The notes that followed were shaky, unsure, but they carried a kind of sincerity no polished recital could match. Axel lay beside her on a circular green cushion, his blindfold still snugly tied, his fur brushed to a shine. His ears perked at every note. Even though he couldn't see the movement of Harper's hands, he responded to her posture, how she sat taller when she played something right, how her breath stilled when she missed. Axel knew Harper like a shadow knows its source. Jessica stood in the doorway, watching them both. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose bun, strands falling to frame her thoughtful face. She wore a soft gray sweater with a button missing, lost, perhaps, in one of the whirlwind days following the trial. But now things were still. She exhaled as Harper played another uncertain chord. "You're getting better," Jessica said gently. Harper tilted her head. "I think the piano understands me more than people do." "Maybe that's why so many people love music," Jessica replied. "It listens back." Life at the Monroe house had settled into a new rhythm. Jessica had filed the paperwork to officially adopt Harper. And though the process would take time, the bond between them was already unmistakable. Jessica had always been a teacher, but now she was something more, a parent by heart, a protector by choice. In the weeks that followed the trial, Jessica used the attention surrounding the case to launch something long overdue, a learning program at the Snowbridge Community Hall for children with disabilities. The idea had started with Harper, but soon expanded into a fully funded initiative supported by the town. The old community hall, once dusty and barely used, was renovated with the help of volunteers, led by a man named Peter Langley. Peter, in his mid-50s, was a retired carpenter with weathered hands and a stoic kindness. He was the type who didn't speak much, but when he did, it mattered. His daughter had been born with cerebral palsy and passed away young, and since then, Peter had found healing in building things for kids like her. "You give 'em a space," he said to Jessica one afternoon while fitting a door frame, "and the rest'll follow." By early spring, the program, named Axel's Corner, was up and running. Each room was designed with accessibility in mind. There were textured walls for sensory learning, quiet corners for overstimulation, and a small music room where Harper spent many of her afternoons. Harper flourished. She grew out of her quiet fear and into something stronger, not loud, but present. She began helping other children at the center, especially those who, like her, didn't speak much but had oceans inside them. Axel followed her everywhere. He became, to the children of Snowbridge, more than a dog. He was a legend, a story, a friend, one child, a boy named Theo, 6 years old, with selective mutism, only spoke when Axel was near. Another, a girl named June, drew Axel every day in crayon, always with a bright green blindfold and a shining sun above him. As the years passed, Harper's name spread beyond Snowbridge. By age 14, she had given her first public talk at a regional education conference. By 16, she stood on a national stage. She never memorized her speeches. She spoke them like songs, from memory, from truth. At every event, she carried with her a framed photograph of Axel, the same one taken a month after the trial, where he sat in front of the community hall sign, tail curled, ears forward. In one of her most well-known speeches, delivered at a summit for inclusive education in Portland, she held the picture high and said, "I never saw the bruises Travis left on me, but Axel did. I never saw the fear in the room, but Axel heard it. He barked when no one else would. And even though he was blind, he saw what no one else dared to." That day, when the applause rose to its feet, Axel, now older and slower, lay at the back of the stage, his tail tapping softly on the floor. He passed away peacefully in Harper's arms at the age of 14. She held him, whispering stories of pine trees and piano notes and all the children he had helped just by existing. Jessica was beside her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. They buried Axel beneath the tallest pine behind the community hall. A stone was carved with his name and the words, "He saw the truth others couldn't." He walked beside it without fear. Years later, Harper, now a young woman, still returned to the tree every January 18th, the day the courtroom turned quiet and everything changed. She would press her fingers to the bark and whisper, "Thank you." And every time she played a piano, she made sure one of the notes, always the same one, lingered just a second longer, just enough for Axel to hear. Sometimes, the ones who cannot see are the ones who lead us to the truth. Harper couldn't see the danger around her, but Axel could. He couldn't speak, but he barked when no one else dared. And in that silent courtroom, it wasn't power or money that revealed the truth. It was the loyalty of a blind dog and the courage of a child. That's the miracle. God often uses the quiet, the overlooked, the broken, to shine light into the darkest places. Axel didn't need sight to become a guardian. Harper didn't need eyes to see what mattered. And Jessica didn't need to be family to become one. In life, we all face moments where we feel unheard or unseen. But just like Harper, you are never truly alone. God sees what others miss. He sends his angels in all forms, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and type Amen to honor every child who's been silenced, every animal who's been faithful, and every miracle that walks quietly beside us. May God bless you and everyone who watches this story. Don't forget to share this message, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, courage, and unexpected grace. Let's keep spreading hope, one story at a time.